Okay, I'm ready to go.
Okay, so Stefan, I'm aware that you're a very busy man, so we'll try and keep everything short and to the point. Why don't we start and just ask? Maybe you can introduce yourself and just give a short background of who you are.
Yes. Hi there. I'm Stefan Ytterborn. I'm the founder and CEO of this, Cake, which is a electric motorcycle company. My background is that I've been in consumer brands throughout my whole career, with a number of different initiatives and companies that I've founded. And it's, the common denominator has been product development, communication, and branding pretty much on a global scale. So my previous venture was a company named POC, developing helmets and protection for gravity sports athletes around the world, with the mission of saving lives and reducing consequences of accidents. My current journey is all about inspiring the market towards zero emission by developing and leading the category of electric motorcycles, basically. And, I'm not the motorcycling kind of guy. There's no romancing here. This new technology is going to flip the motorcycling space upside down. It's very much about, the idea of not polluting, not disturbing, and the need for, or I would say obligation towards planet Earth in terms of changing the manners and methods and means of transportation.
Stefan, I did a bit of LinkedIn stalking last night and looking at your bio, and it seems like you are a serial founder. You just your back catalog is just founder. I understand there's a creative background with you. It's unclear to me exactly what that was. Are you actually a designer? Did you study architecture? What was it that you studied?
Yeah, and academically, I'm not a designer, and I wouldn't even describe myself as a designer. I'm more of a director, or making the comparison with a film director, which is basically casting designers and making films. I've been in design throughout my whole career, but I guess I'm more of the organizer and the director, getting stuff together. But the reason why I'm doing this is another one, because the goal itself is not actually to materialize services or products. It's to bring purpose, and I've learned to develop products, and I think I've brought more than 4,000 products from the reason why all the way through implementing processes and making and getting into the market throughout my career. So consumer products have somewhat become my tool of supporting purpose and meaning.
But what is it that you studied?
Well, basically, I'm a business kind of guy. To be honest, I never really finished my studies, because I started my first company leaving university when I was like 20 years old, because somehow I didn't have the patience of staying around. So what my first journey was about was basically importing contemporary design in terms of furniture and lights and stuff from Italy to Scandinavia, and that's how I kind of got in depth with the design and architecture community, basically, and I somehow built a network and a position within that network, and that's something that I've continued, working in and with and so forth, based on that. But it was a quick learning kind of experience, and somehow I'm stuck in that space.
Stefan, you've got the things that you've done is and the people that you've done those things with is really, really impressive. What I wanted to know was, like, so you clearly have an interest in design and a passion for it, and particularly contemporary design. I wondered, like in the mid '90s or early '90s or whatever, when you started getting into that and you had this idea for this importing business. Was there a scene where you grew up that was like design a real? Was it a really popular thing happening where you were?
Yeah, I think that I'm the generation that I'm getting old these days. Looking back at the late '80s, design was very much a something that over time, design and the preferences with whatever makes sense in terms of what is being designed or made due to the society and its values at different during different times. And in the 80s, it was all super posh, super luxury and whatnot. And then in the early 90s, when the financial markets collapsed, and there was this opportunity that actually came to to promote traditional values of Scandinavian design, and that's how I kind of moved my perspective during the late 80s, importing contemporary design from Italy, Spain, and France, and so forth to Sweden, and then reverting that whole thing because suddenly, due to the situation financially. Aspects of value, long-term durability, simplicity, efficiency, and so forth. Traditional Scandinavian values suddenly were the ones being promoted everywhere, and I turned from importing contemporary international design into reigniting the opportunity for Scandinavian design internationally. So. That's from one year to another I changed from that into something else. And I must say when it comes to design, I never speak about design myself internally, because design is it's a verb, it's not a noun. And the misconception about what design is so severe that just mentioning the word design, people kind of assume that it has a specific typology or a specific style, which is not the case. To me, it's all about materializing strategies. What's your ambition? Make it happen. Then you kind of shape it and until it makes sense from that specific ambition. But what I wanted to say in this case is that there was a generation that was, when design started, to become something that really, it was like at the beginning of a huge movement in the beginning of the 90s. In Milan, there were guys like, Marc Newson, Lovegrove, Jasper Morrison, Tom Dixon, the whole bunch was down there, and we were all the same age, and design had for the first time a tangible traction within a youth culture somehow, and I was a part of that, and we were a bunch of 50 or 100 guys from different parts of the world meeting up in Milan, making that the kind of melting pot where we got together and things started to happen. And so that was a long answer to your question, but I think it's vital to understand the different facets and reasons why things turned out the way they did for me and for a number of other individuals in that sense.
Stefan, I read up about that, and I was going to ask you about those guys specifically because you actually curated some events in Stockholm with those designers. Is that right?
Yeah. So what I did was like even though Scandinavian design became my ejection point to communicate with the outside world that hey, look, there's something happening in Sweden. I also got involved and got to know all of these guys. So. One side of the many businesses I was doing at the time was doing exhibitions, and I did exhibitions with in the late 80s with guys like Konstantin Gricic, with Jasper Morrison, with Marc Newson, and so forth. And we were only kids at the time, and these guys have now become superstars, which is fun. But that's how I kind of got into it, and that's how I also continued developing what we were doing. And After a few years, I also, started a design management firm where I was working with, a number of different companies around the world, where I also had the opportunity to actually collaborate with my fellow design colleagues from the rest of the world. So I was able to invite these guys for different projects, developing products, whether it was, cutlery or ceramics or glassware or whatever it was. So. And there's still, I just did a fun project with Konstantin Gricic. Right, it's happening now, which is going to be official in Milan. It's not a cake project, but still, I'm in constant dialogue with Marc Newson on a few different projects. So it's still a part of my life, an important part of my life, I would say, my business life.
With regards to that scene in Milan and all those guys, I mean, was everybody generally quite welcoming to somebody like you that was maybe not a designer, were they accepting of an outsider?
I think that what I did was that I had my own brands at the time already then. So I had, for instance, I was the only Swedish company exhibiting at the Milan show in 1993, and I had this brand named CVI, where I had a combination of Swedish and international designers, many of those that I mentioned before, and so I was always in their eyes as well, the guy to somehow, the guy that somewhat made it happen. I was the entrepreneur. I was conceptualizing things. I was creating stages for designers and getting products out there. Initially in very small scales, and eventually, for instance, I went to IKEA and convinced them to make a project named IKEA PS that was later launched in 1995, which was a big success for, I'd say, Scandinavian design in general, and for Swedish design in particular, and for IKEA to kind of move out from the copycat kind of lousy image they had as of before. So again, I think that I'm the initiator, I'm the implementer and collaborator. So there was never ever any kind of let's say resistance between what I was doing and what the designers were doing.
Stefan, I on this subject of IKEA, you very casually just brushed over that, but that PS range that you were essentially responsible for implementing, that is still going today. And I something that I didn't realize literally up until last night was that IKEA did have this reputation as this kind of copycat manufacturer that wasn't really known or respected for design at all. I wonder what if you could elaborate on what that conversation went like when you got the meeting with Mr. IKEA himself and said, look, this is what you got to do.
So basically, getting into the design space as I did then, late 80s, IKEA represented something that I totally hated back in those days. Because again, also being, transparently open about the fact that, my perspective was a kind of narrow-minded design, big-headed kind of, idea on what IKEA did or did not do. And that said, they were definitely not on my radar in terms of potentially ever becoming anyone that I would like to work with. But then, as this whole thing changed in weeks, where this kind of overwhelming 80 design kind of luxury, aspiration turned towards something that was, I'd say smart, durable, and Scandinavian. I kind of, and that's when I got my own brands going in that sense. I went to Milan and so forth. But I also realized that with the limited power I had with my own, companies with limited resources and all that, IKEA suddenly, turned up becoming a tool for me to activate the interest around Scandinavian design. Think if I could convince IKEA to use the opportunity in time where suddenly everyone was looking at Scandinavian traditional values, and there was a super creative design scene in Sweden with small companies everywhere and so forth, but they had no chance of getting out of the country. There was no communication outside Sweden. I was doing my little small, whatever I was doing. But if I could get the support of the big dragon, convincing them that, hey guys, this is the perfect moment for you guys to clean out the old stuff where you're being, considered being the copycats and whatnot, and actually create a new platform where you promote contemporary Swedish design and go international with that. And they kind of bought that whole thing and the arguments I shared, and I got the assignment from them to lead this process. And then eventually we launched it in Milan in 1995. And it was like, there are tons of stores associated to that. But I think that in the long run, I think that it meant a lot more to IKEA than just, that specific project, because I think that we also kind of injected a new, I'd say, energy into IKEA itself and for the designers, on a daily basis, because this was designers coming from the outside, giving them the self-confidence of actually breaking barriers that they had never ever done before. And I think that without exaggerating, what I brought to IKEA in this sense, me and the fellow, designers and people working in this project, I think that we did to some extent also cater for the position that IKEA has now, where they actually realize themselves that we can actually bring a lot of relevant design without, looking too close to what other people were doing and doing similar things. They kind of established their own self-confidence and integrity. And I think that, speaking to people wherever it might be in the world, people would say that, oh, IKEA, it's that Scandinavian design, whatever. And whatever that means, I don't know. But they truly have a much more aspirational relevancy in terms of being accurate and in pace with time and what people, no matter who you'd be from a demographic perspective, would say, high five, IKEA, they're doing their thing and they're great products at decent pricing. So I guess we brought something to IKEA.
I think you brought a hell of a lot to IKEA. I think the interesting question for me is just how you prepared for a presentation like that. I mean, was this weeks of work or months of work or what exactly did you do to prepare for that?
Basically, the whole thing was that it was not Ingmar Kamprad who I convinced, who's now passed away, and but there was one of Ingmar Kamprad's, key guys who was, one of the bosses down at Älmhult where they have their head offices, and he was he was known. His name is Lennart Ekmark, and without Lennart, this project would never ever have happened. And he was the rowdy kind of guy who was questioning stuff and daring new stuff, and he was a bit of a free spirit, I would say, within IKEA. And this is the summer of 1992, I think. And I read a piece in a daily paper here in Sweden about the guy who was breaking barriers and being, the wild guy at IKEA. And I was like, that's the guy I need to convince. So I actually took my card, got a meeting with him, and I'd say through the combination of energy, enthusiasm, and rational arguments why IKEA could actually do what what I'm sharing here, he kind of believed me. And I would say that I had gained some kind of acceptance or recognition in Sweden too, with doing all of these exhibitions and shows with young contemporary international design and so forth. So I didn't. It was like he knew who I was. He potentially respected what I was doing and tried to achieve, and had the kind of, I'd say, mandate within IKEA to actually pull this through. So I think that it was a combination of him being there and myself, and just getting started. So there was no major strategic, telephone book plan that that went through different, levels of decision making at IKEA. He had the opportunity of, he had the kind of grant of supporting the initiative. But then during the process, there were many times where he was like, we can't make this happen. It's too politically, infectious and whatnot. So, but anyhow, we pulled it through.
Amazing. Around that time you had a company called Clara. Is that right?
Yes. At this time we had CBI, which was my contemporary furniture stuff that I showed in Milan, starting in 1993. We also had a retail store concept in Stockholm, together with Clara, my wife at the time, the mother of our two boys, Jonas Andersson, a guy that I had hired with CBI, and a guy named Christian Springfeld. So myself, Clara, Jonas, and Christian started Clara. Yes.
So you mentioned that the store that you had was the first general experience store. What exactly do you mean by that? Does it sound like a place where you guys can just kind of hang out and drink? Is that right?
No, I think that to some extent, and I would say that we were inspired at the time. There was a store in Milan named High Tech that I think was a great inspiration source to what we were doing. And it was also a kind of a reverse mark against the Porsche 90 or design in the 80s. It was everyday stuff, glassware, which these days it's like evident that it happens everywhere. Sorry, I just lost the headphone here.
Carry on.
Right. But the combination of a Geoponte chair and Duralex glasses, for instance. So anything from everyday, utility stuff to high-end stuff in some kind of combination. So I think that we were really early in bringing a casual, but I don't know if sophisticated is much, an exaggeration, but what made the combination between rational and aesthetic somehow.
Stefan, so you another with Sweet Code, was that that was something that you had between 95 and 97, which was basically, as I understand it, a collective umbrella of different companies that were sharing the same marketing efforts and trade show activities.
Yeah.
Where did you get the insight for that? Was that kind of born out of necessity?
Yeah, I think that there also, again, I think that to be perfectly clear about the situation, I think that in France, for instance, they had this organization called VIA, gathering contemporary French companies as an organization when going to trade shows, whether it was Cologne or Milan or whatever it might be. So the fact that during these years when I kind of got going with supporting the idea of expanding Scandinavian or Swedish presence on the design scene internationally, I realized that there were a number of new small companies starting. So instead of doing it myself, going to Milan with CBI, being the only Swedish exhibitor, I think that in '94 I brought with me Björn Dahlström, which was another company, and Lammhults, another Swedish company that eventually did not become a partner with Sweetcode. But in 1995, the same year as we went to Milan, launching the IKEA PS project, we also gathered 5 companies under that same umbrella, Sweetcode, standing for Swedish Contemporary Design, Sweetcode. And with those, aside from my own CBI, we had Asplund Design, which is still happening as a retail phenomenon and a brand in Sweden. David Design from Malmö, same thing. Forminode, which was Thomas Sandel, a successful Swedish designer and architect's dad's company doing cabinets, and Box Design. So we were 5 companies going to Milan together, and that Sweetcode thing continued to happen. I left in '96 because when I started my consultancy business, Ytterborn and Fuentes, I left CBI, I left Clara, and I therefore left Sweetco too on an operational basis.
Was that so that you and that's when Ytterborn and your design management company started? Yes. Was that what was the decision to go into essentially a service-based business?
Well, what I realized was that after the success with IKEA PS, and I had, I was painfully, I never ever had any cash. I don't know how we actually got CBI to where we got it, or Clara or whatever. We didn't have any money, and to be honest, we didn't make much money out of those companies. But with the experience from IKEA, I realized that with enough gasoline in the tank, doing anything from trade shows to print and graphic design and actually in being able to invest in tooling for injecting plastic and whatnot, I kind of everything changed to me. I realized that with enough resources you can do magic, and inspired from my own experience with IKEA PS, I decided to leave my own kind of entrepreneurial, making my own stuff, into supporting other bigger companies with the resources, investing in going international or global or repositioning or whatever it might be. So I could use my ways, my beliefs in terms of what makes relevancy, and then how can I support success much better, being a consultant for a number of years. And I stayed being that for, let me see, it was between '96 and 2001, I think, that I was doing the consultancy stuff. And that was a great number of years doing amazing stuff. That I just had an interview with Finnish company Iittala, they're celebrating 100 years, I think. And they produced this book, and some of the best-selling stuff these days is still stuff that we developed back in the days for them. And it's like, these days, time flies. It's like, 25 years ago. So that was
incredible.
Fun. Yeah.
Stefan, if you don't mind me asking, those early deals that you would have made with companies when you were starting your consulting firm, were they done on like a royalty basis, or were you saying like, for a fee I can do X, Y, and Z?
I was always fee based, and I can regret that if I had been a bit smarter at it. But it's not. I've never had the intention of becoming wealthy. I do things because I feel I need to and must. So the drive of actually making stuff happen is much more, a reason behind whatever I'm doing. So, but I realized in the aftermath of stuff we did, I'm happy for the guys that we made multimillionaires thanks to their royalties, but we were paid with fees.
Do you think that like if you were doing that today, you would obviously establish a royalty?
I was knowing, but it's knowing history.
Hindsight is a wonderful thing. But
yes, I think. But and honestly, I don't think I had the negotiation capacity either at the time, because I was still a little too young doing what I was doing, and my track record, was limited, and my negotiation power was, not at the stage where I potentially could have changed this dramatically and receiving a royalty to myself. But anyhow, those are just speculations, and I'm happy about the fact that I did what I did. I brought, to some extent, my ideas and initiatives to something that means a lot to business aspects and other certain individuals, designers and so forth. So it's all about happy faces.
Stefan, moving on from that, then 2004 comes and you start POC.
Yeah.
And again, I learned something last night. I learned a lot last night. But POC actually is an acronym for a piece of cake.
Correct.
So what is the fascination with cake?
I'll tell you. So this happens to be one of the first models we did. So before naming the company, I knew I wanted to use this symbol here, which is like a version of a crash test dummy symbol. I always admired that the simplicity of that symbol, and it's been evident everywhere. But normally you can see a similar symbol on the side of one of those metal mannequins being used for crash testing cars. So it was the perfect symbol for a company getting into protection and so forth. And I didn't know what to name the company, but one morning in the car I was like, hey, looking at it from above, it looks like two pieces of cake. And then the P and the O and the C, POC, became, a short name, easy to pronounce in all languages and so forth. So that's not super strategic, but that's how it happened.
Great. And with the decision, so you've outlined your mission was to save lives and to make better and more accurate products. I've got two questions with regards to POC. Number one, what made you decide to enter into a product business again?
Well, I was to some extent, there's this frustration being a consultant because you spend so much time and effort in making things perfect, and then when you actually hand over, and it's like, I totally regard my fellow colleagues, the people that assign me for doing these projects and so forth, but large organizations have a tendency, if they're not used to working in a specific manner, of actually not conserving the qualities that are being implemented, and that's frustrating, from a side, seeing now things are kind of, somehow breaking down. So that was one of the aspects where the frustration opened my eyes towards getting back to owning my own product and process all the way through. But then when it comes to this actual product, I used the ski race myself, and at the time I have 3 sons these days, but my 2 sons back then, they were getting on skis, and suddenly I was like back on the slope and training my sons and their friends, giant slalom and ski racing, and with the nervousness of being a parent with kids passing by huge trees at high speeds, and knowing that the level of protection they were using was not all that good. That was one of the driving forces. The other was that if there would be any skier listening to this, they'd know that when the carving ski that actually entered the market 20 years ago, things changed. People started to carve and turn much better, and that also increased the level of speed, and people started crashing, and they were conscious about the fact that they need to protect themselves to some degree. And the third main reason was basically the X Games community, where kids were jumping and doing flips and whatnot, and simply needed protection to survive, and that influenced a whole generation of kids wanting to associate to that X Game culture, and also using protection and helmets and back protectors and whatever as an identity, social kind of belonging signage. Those aspects turn towards the fact that this is gonna, the whole helmet business in skiing, and we got into cycling as well eventually, was gonna boom, and so it did, and we had 10 wonderful years. It's still existing, and it's still going really, really well. I lost another earphone again, not a problem. But anyhow, we sold, and I left for various reasons, and started what I'm doing now, cake. So
we'll get into it in a second, Stefan. I just wondered, was there nothing substantial on the market at that time, or did you just see a significant opportunity to improve?
There was. I think that there's a clear, at the time I'd probably done 2,500 products plus in different means of making manufacturing materials and so forth. So I had a pretty good notion about how we could improve, or how I could improve the level of safety for my kids. That was my main concern. And at the time, people were not really, wearing helmets. So the level of competition was pretty slow. And of course, there were a number of brands out there at the time. And people asked me, like, what are you going to start a helmet business for? There's already Alpina, there's Brico, and there's Carrera, and there's this, and there's that. But I think that my point was that, hey, guys, in 10 years from now, everyone's going to wear a helmet when they're skiing. So everything in society points towards that, what I just described before, together with that the strongest trend in society in general is like well-being, health and whatever. So this trend will kind of drive the fact that together with the other stuff that people will be wearing helmets. And at the time, approaching investors around, they were like, "Oh, I'm never going to wear a helmet." And those grumpy older guys than me at the time, I still see them from time to time, waiting, to take a lift into some ski resort, wherever it might be. And the level of revenge is amazing. I pass them, and they're standing there with a helmet on, and in the best of cases, wearing a POC helmet. So I'm like, "Hi, there you go, man." So yeah, that was the story.
Was that the first company that you actually raised capital for, Stefan?
Yes, I think that was the first. That was the first company where I did raise capital. Yes.
Can I ask you how big you intended that company to be? Was there a clear objective?
I think that no. I did not have a clear idea about. I think that idea kind of evolved over time. I think that I went from targeting 10 million pounds in revenues to 20 and eventually 30 and 60 and 100. So I think I can push those ambitions forward. But looking back, it's like, without saying that, it's my general take on raising money is that if you don't have the capacity yourself, you need the cash to be able to develop in whatever pace you're trying to develop your business with or in. And altogether, I think we raised about 8 million pounds or 10 million euros. And looking at that today, I mean, it's like what we achieved with that money for POC was amazing. So even though we did raise money, we didn't spend them, with being sloppy. It was like using the money twice the best we could, and for a number of reasons we did succeed. But I would say something that, even though that I've been developing products throughout my life, I had no kind of, I had never been in the sports industry, even though I'm a big sports, guy in terms of what I do and what I like to do in my free time, or what I did when I had free time. And I think that's a great benefit, and that's also which is something which is beneficial with what I'm doing right now. Because our inspiration when it comes to helmets in this case was not looking at what Nike or Adidas was doing, because that's what the sports community is doing. They're looking at each other. Our inspiration came from contemporary art, from architecture when it comes to shapes and surfaces and tactility and whatnot. So I think that we came from a totally different direction. I think that when you're not burdened by what cannot be done or what can be done based on embedded conservative approaches within a specific space, you're much more likely to break new barriers and come up with something which has a new typology or style to it that has potentially better relevancy to at least certain market segments.
They're unquestionably very attractive products, but I have to be honest with you. I mean, a friend of mine's a keen cyclist, and he was like, "Dude, he was telling me that you founded this company as well, POC." Yeah. Because I told him that I was interviewing you, and he loves your helmets. And I've seen them. Obviously, I'm not a cyclist myself, but I've seen them around, and I was like, "Oh, those are really cool looking helmets." But I wasn't sure how comfortable they would be. So you obviously had a vision to merge both aesthetics and that those architectural sensibility with function, obviously.
Yeah, I think that functionality is key here, and I think that what we did with POC or with any company is that you need to be able to convince your toughest, your toughest enemies or users or whatever it might be. So the benefit of being able to work with something which is performance oriented, like helmets, where you can actually measure how well it absorbs energy, it also has this other, performance aspect to it, which is like we needed to start where it all happens. We needed to support guys, aspiring to win a gold medal in the Olympics, or for cycling in the Tour de France or whatever. And then you start getting to this the real, I'd say complexity of developing and materializing projects and visions, which is basically, when someone asks, people would have asked me, how do you make the safest helmet in the world? And it's super easy. You just make it this big. But there's no one who'd be using that because you're going to look stupid. And for those that are aspiring to win the Tour de France or downhill Olympic, they need aerodynamic perfection and whatnot. So the kind of the opposites that needs to be combined between optimizing safety and optimizing performance is a contradiction where it becomes really interesting. And that's, same thing goes when I was doing glassware with Italy. It was like, how can we make sure that we create something that has great functionality, is a good representative of its time when it's been developed in terms of behavior, social, behavior and aspirations, mean of making, durability and whatnot, to make it a classic. Because I think that in a world where consumption is one of the biggest threats, or the pace of consumption, we need to bring relevancy and reduce the pace of consumption, and support durability and permanence of product and use. And that's a driving force with whatever I'm doing, and therefore there's a true connection between a drinking glass, a ski helmet, and an electric motorbike, the way I deal with it.